It's funny how when you look back on something, you realize how much it matters to you. It doesn't have to be great. Even if it doesn't mean much to you, the impact is still there. Next month, the Noblesse anime adaptation will make its debut, making it the third and final anime to come out of the Crunchytune partnership this year. This is also the second time Noblesse will have been animated. The first was a forgettable OVA from 2016. I don't have any strong feelings towards Noblesse, and more than likely will not be watching the anime. However, as we approach October 6th, I've been looking back on the webcomic and meditating on the emotions those memories concur. My thoughts and feelings on Noblesse lie within a mist of nostalgic empathy. To me, Noblesse feels like the biggest project Crunchytune has to offer. It may not be the same for others. For you, it may be Tower of God or God of High School, arguably the bigger comics on the Webtoons platform out of the three. I say arguably because that's purely a subjective opinion, and Noblesse is actually over. Noblesse ran for 12 years, ending in 2019. In fact, it was probably the first Korean webcomic to receive an anime adaptation. Don't take my word for that, as I haven't looked deeply into the subject. Like I said, I don't have any strong feelings towards the Noblesse manhwa, and I was never a fan to begin with, but I did read the first few chapters years ago, just enough to watch and understand the OVA, and despite dropping it, I did feel some sort of sadness to see it go. My history with Noblesse begins in 2015. I was in high school and just getting into webcomics. Unsurprisingly, some of my first webcomics were yaoi and held the most of my attention. Always Raining Here by Hazel and Bell, Technicolor London, well now today is known as Hazy London, by Scotty are some of the first to come to mind. I also remember You Suck by Josh L, Go Get a Roomie, and Girls with Slingshots when I began to venture into more mature comics. I read webcomics on various platforms like DeviantArt and their own websites, but I didn't know about major hosting sites until I was introduced to Webtoons, and my introduction to Webtoons was through Noblesse. I have a friend that I've known since high school. She's probably watching this video right now and knows who she is. Hi Portia. She was the one who introduced me to Noblesse, as she was a huge fan at the time. My friends and I loved to read comics and manga and would often exchange our books and recommendations. Finding this whole new world of free art on the internet was huge to a broke nerd like me. So I started to spend more time reading webcomics. Portia thought I would really like Noblesse, and when she explained it to me, it sounded crazy. My kind of crazy. Okay, so like this super powerful vampire wakes up from his nearly 1,000-year slumber and he's a high schooler now. Also, Frankenstein's monster is his servant for some reason. So he goes by the name of Rye and is learning about these things called friends, but these supernatural beings are after him and he has to stop them because we wouldn't have a story if he didn't. I honestly can't tell you what happens in Noblesse because I don't remember it well. I remember being bored and quickly dropping the comic after a few chapters. Portia did warn me that the beginning was slow and it would get better later. I obviously didn't stick around until later. I dropped Noblesse just as quickly as I started it and moved on. However, Noblesse still mattered to me in different ways. If it didn't, I wouldn't be making this video. This comic was my introduction to Webtoons. At the time, I thought the site was some weird pirating platform, and I was heavily against pirating at the time, but that didn't stop my curiosity as I explored the website. I found an entirely new world. Some of the long since completed webcomics were still ongoing back then. I laughed at Library Ghost, cried at The Kids Are Alright, and was very much so confused by God of Bath, and I still am because I do not understand that comic. And I remember not being able to handle the painful emotions of All That You Are. I remember trying anything that looked interesting. There were a few comics that were publishing at the time that I read all the way through, but soon the platform grew and I found comics that held my attention, each better than the last. Cooking Comically helped teach me how to cook by reintroducing me to the wonders of French toast. Heroine Chic was so much fun to me because I love comics that take superheroes and make them part of everyday life for average citizens and follow the people who profit off of them. I was reading Lore Olympus, Catalogue Adventures, and Toaster Do while they were in Discovery and watched them breaking into Webtoons originals. Yeah, I could have done all of that without reading Noblesse, but Noblesse was the comic that was at the right place at the right time. Noblesse was also my introduction to manhwa. I recall Googling the term and learning about that world as well. Korean comics were so foreign to me back then. Manga was my home and introduction to the beauty and culture of Japan. I learned how to pronounce the names and honorifics with time and soon it came with ease. I learned about summer firework festivals, the gorgeous traditional clothing, the food, the education system, and how incredible their public transport is. Yes, I know how much of a huge nerd I sound saying that out loud. Just leave me alone, okay? The proudly displayed histories of places like Kyoto, chaos of Tokyo, and individuality of Osaka. Manga showed me this entirely new way of life I couldn't and still can't get enough of. Korea was an entirely different beast. Of course, being high schoolers, we knew and memed the tyranny of Kim Jong-un, and I feel like because the evil of North Korea was so grand, the culture of South Korea was overshadowed. Today, South Korea is ever present thanks to the breakout of K-pop groups, films like The Handmaiden and Parasite, and the growing popularity of manhwa. And even though I haven't consumed much of it, I'm always proud of the international success of foreign media. Korea earned its hold on audiences in the East and the West, and I hope it only grows bigger and never lets go. The day I stop preaching my desire for more recognition in the Korean animation industry will be when that day comes. And again, Noblesse was responsible for that. Without Noblesse, I would have never read Household Affairs and Can't See, Can't Hear But Love after conducting more research into the world of manhwa. Without the love for manhwa those comics gave me, I would never have readily consumed more art like Killing Stalking or Blood Bank. I learned so much about Korea through these comics, how tragic their poverty is, or their mandatory military service, or the weight a name carries and how it determines your wealth and class. Korea is far from a perfect country, but I still think it's beautiful. I think this because it's a nation of human beings just like you and me. People who, like Japan, Brazil, Indonesia, Poland, and many more nations around the globe, have their own culture to be proud of. Korea is a rich country with a rich history and a dark past. A place I cannot wait to visit once I finish schooling and immigrate to Australia. And I wouldn't have these feelings if manhwa hadn't introduced me to the beauty and darkness of South Korea. When I really think about Noblesse, I think about how much it helped introduce me to the power of education through art. At the time, I didn't know how much I was learning from reading comics that weren't from my country. Attack on Titan and Ouran High School Host Club introduced me to Japan. Persepolis taught me about the oppression caused by the Islamic Revolution and how those effects are still an uncontrolled and misplaced power today. Scott Pilgrim taught me what it was like being a young adult in Canada in the early aughts. As time went on, I grew up and I'm now trying to advance my medical career and running this channel as a fun side hobby and outlet to talk about the art I love. I've made friends just as wonderful as the ones I've lost. Even though bonds from the past are now severed, I'm still grateful to have experienced them. Portia moved on from Noblesse. She's the biggest Berserk fan I know, and when asking her about Noblesse, she said the comic just fell off and didn't have the best ending. I'm sure there's many Noblesse fans who feel that way as well. I don't know what the hype for Noblesse is as grand as GOT or GOH, but I know that there's still an audience for it, and the passionate fans who once loved the comic will now go on to love the anime. I may watch the anime only for them, the fans of a project I never understood. My feelings towards Noblesse may be null, but the chances it gave me are there. I'm glad that Portia introduced this comic into my life, and I'm glad that I didn't like it. Without it and other works of art, I probably would still be here today, just with those introductions being different. I honestly don't know. Whatever it is or whatever it may be, I just know that Noblesse ended last year, and I was shocked and upset to see a comic I didn't like end. On October 6th, the anime may be here if COVID permits, and I may or may not be there. So I'm just going to close this video by saying, please, to whoever enjoyed Noblesse much more than I did, enjoy the anime for me next month. And again, I love how I had to stop for you because you walk in here, your footsteps are gonna pick up on the mic, and then you just go in the corner and lay down, and you just look at me like, "What? Hi, you just lay down, lay down. We'll go out later." All right, Joel, I love you too.